During a party, my wife encouraged everyone to make jokes about me. The laughter felt endless. The next morning, she woke up to an empty house, divorce papers, and a folder full of statements from people who witnessed her emotional abuse. The room erupted in laughter before I even reached the drinks table. I hadn't heard the joke, but I knew it was about me. I saw the way heads turned, the way eyes darted toward me and then quickly away. My wife stood in the center of it all, holding a glass of wine, her grin stretched wider than usual. She didn't look surprised. She looked proud. I paused at the doorway, scanning the crowd. Her friends, people I'd known for years, were huddled in small groups, whispering, giggling, nudging each other. I caught snippets of conversation. "He still wears those shoes? Did you see his face when she said that?" I hadn't even taken off my coat, and already I felt like I'd walked into a trap. She spotted me and waved me over. "There he is," she called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. "The man of the hour." More laughter. I smiled weakly and walked toward her, trying to convince myself I was imagining it. Maybe it was just playful teasing. Maybe I was being too sensitive. But then came the first real jab. One of her friends, a guy named Mark, raised his glass and said, "To the man who thinks folding laundry is a personality trait." The crowd roared. I chuckled, pretending it didn't sting. My wife leaned into me and whispered, "It's just fun, don't be dramatic." I nodded, but something inside me shifted. I wasn't being dramatic. I was being humiliated. The jokes kept coming. One after another. About my clothes, my habits, my job. Someone mimicked the way I talk when I'm nervous. Another joked about how I ask permission to breathe. My wife laughed the loudest. She clapped, she cheered, she egged them on. I tried to play along. I smiled. I laughed. I made a few self-deprecating comments to show I could take it. But every word felt like a slap. I wasn't part of the fun. I was the target. At one point I excused myself and stepped outside. The air was cold and I welcomed it. I leaned against the railing, staring at the stars, wondering how it had come to this. I used to be proud to stand beside her. Now I felt like a prop in her performance. I stayed out there for a while, hoping the party would shift, that maybe the focus would move on. When I walked back in, the laughter had died down, but the damage was done. As I passed through the hallway, someone grabbed my arm gently. It was Rachel, one of her coworkers. She looked uncomfortable. I just wanted to say, "I'm sorry," she murmured. "That was too much. You didn't deserve that." Her words hit harder than the jokes. They confirmed what I already knew. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't being overly sensitive. I was being ridiculed. I thanked her quietly and walked back into the living room. My wife was retelling a story about how I once got lost in a parking garage. She exaggerated every detail, turning it into a comedy routine. People laughed. I stood there watching her perform, feeling like a stranger in my own life. I didn't confront her. Not then. I didn't cause a scene. I simply waited for a moment when no one was looking, slipped my coat back on and walked out the front door. I sat in the car for a long time. The engine off, the silence thick. I stared at the steering wheel, replaying every moment of the night. The jokes. The laughter. Her face. I thought about all the times I had defended her. When people said she was harsh, I said she was honest. When they said she was controlling, I said she was protective. I had spent years shielding her from criticism, believing that love meant loyalty. But that night something broke. I realized I had been protecting someone who never protected me. I drove home slowly, the streets empty and quiet. I walked into the house, looked around and felt a strange sense of clarity. The walls, the furniture, the photos, it all looked the same, but I didn't feel the same. I sat down at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. That party wasn't just a bad night. It was a turning point. It was the moment I stopped making excuses. The moment I stopped laughing along. The moment I decided that dignity mattered more than appearances. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat there, calm and focused, knowing that the next steps would be mine to take. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally standing up for myself. The silence in the house after that party was louder than any laughter I'd heard that night. I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table until the sun began to rise, staring at nothing, replaying every moment. I wasn't just hurt, I was awake. And once you wake up, you can't go back to sleep. I started small. A message to Rachel, the coworker who had quietly apologized at the party. I didn't ask for much, just if she remembered what was said. Her reply came quickly. I do. And I'm sorry again. I've seen it before too. That last sentence stayed with me. I reached out to others one by one. Friends, acquaintances, even a few people I hadn't spoken to in months. I didn't accuse. I didn't rant. I simply asked if they'd ever noticed how my wife treated me. Some hesitated. Some deflected. But a few responded with honesty. One friend, Jason, wrote back, I always thought she was joking, but yeah, it was constant. You were always the punchline. Another, Melissa, said, she made it seem like you were lucky to have her. Like you couldn't survive without her. I saved every message. Screenshots, emails, voice notes. I created a folder on my laptop labeled Truth. It wasn't just for legal reasons, it was for me. I needed to see it laid out to know I wasn't imagining things. The more I collected, the clearer the picture became. There were patterns. Times she had interrupted me mid-sentence in front of others. Moments she had rolled her eyes when I spoke. Stories she exaggerated to make me look foolish. I found an old video from a barbecue 2 summers ago. She was telling a story about me locking myself out of the house. Everyone laughed. I watched her face in the video, how she looked around to make sure people were laughing, how she added details that weren't true. I remembered that day. I hadn't locked myself out. I'd stepped outside to take a call and she'd locked the door behind me as a joke. I added the video to the folder. Some people were reluctant to get involved. One friend said, I don't want to take sides. I understood. But I wasn't asking for sides, I was asking for truth. Kept going. I found old text threads where she had mocked me to mutual friends. I found photos she had captioned with jokes at my expense. I found a birthday card she had written that said, to my favorite mess. Each piece added weight to the folder. And each time I added something I felt a little stronger. But strength isn't constant. One night I sat with the folder in my lap, staring at the screen. I wondered if I was being too harsh. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I should just let it go. I closed the laptop and walked into the living room. The house was quiet. Her shoes were by the door. Her coat hung neatly on the rack. Everything looked normal. I sat on the couch and thought about the party. About the way she had laughed. About how she had looked at me, not with love but with amusement. I opened the laptop again. I clicked through the folder. I read the messages. I watched the video. I reminded myself, this wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a pattern. A choice. The next morning I printed everything. I bought a simple folder from the store. Black, plain, no labels. I placed the documents inside, organized by date. I added a note on top. This is not revenge. This is truth. I called a lawyer. Quietly. Privately. I asked questions. I listened. I didn't rush. I signed the divorce papers a week later. The night before I left, I walked through the house one last time. I didn't take much. A few clothes. My laptop. Folder. I placed the folder on the kitchen counter. Right next to the papers. I didn't leave a note. I didn't need to. I stepped outside before sunrise. The sky was pale, the air cool. I didn't look back. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clear. Gathering the truth wasn't easy. It wasn't fast. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. Careful. Intentional. And it was mine. The sky was still gray when I stepped out of the house, but by the time she stirred awake, the light had shifted. I wasn't there to see it, but I can imagine the way she called my name, expecting me to answer from the kitchen or the hallway. Silence must have greeted her. Silence and the emptiness of a house stripped of my presence. She walked through each room, I'm sure, her voice rising with irritation. Where are you? She must have said, half expecting me to appear with an apology. But the rooms were bare of sound. My shoes were gone from the rack. My jacket missing from the hook. The quiet was undeniable. Then she reached the kitchen. On the counter, the folder sat neatly beside the divorce papers. I picture her standing there, staring at them, her hand hovering but not touching. The laughter she had enjoyed so freely at the party had been replaced with a silence she couldn't control. She flipped through the folder, reading the statements, the screenshots, the memories others had shared. Each page was a mirror, showing her the cruelty she had disguised as humor. Her reaction was swift. My phone lit up with messages. First short, sharp ones. Where are you? What is this? Then longer ones, pleading, bargaining, twisting. Calls followed, one after another, until I turned the phone off. I didn't need to hear her voice. I had already made peace with my decision. She reached out to mutual friends, hoping they would intervene. But many of them had already seen the folder. They knew the truth. Some ignored her. Some told her plainly, "You went too far." The image she had built, the one of a confident woman who always had the upper hand, began to crack. Meanwhile, I started rebuilding. Therapy was my first step. Sitting in that office, speaking aloud the things I had kept buried, felt like opening windows in a house that had been locked for years. My therapist listened, asked questions, and helped me see the patterns I had lived under. Each session gave me back a piece of myself. I reconnected with old friends. People I hadn't seen in months, even years. We met for coffee, for walks, for dinners. They welcomed me back without judgment. We laughed, not at me but with me. That distinction mattered more than I can explain. I found joy in small things she used to mock. Cooking meals the way I liked them. Wearing the clothes she had called boring. Listening to music she had dismissed. Each act was simple, but together they felt like reclaiming territory I had lost. The truth spread quietly. People who had once laughed with her began to see the damage. They remembered the jokes, the way she had pushed them to join in, the way she had smiled at my expense. And now, with the folder in front of them, they understood it wasn't harmless fun. It was abuse disguised as entertainment. Her image changed. Invitations stopped coming. Friends drifted away. The same crowd that had laughed with her now avoided her. She had built her reputation on charm and wit, but the foundation had crumbled. I didn't celebrate her downfall. I didn't gloat. I simply watched from a distance, focusing on my own healing. One evening, I sat alone in my new apartment, a modest place with bare walls and quiet rooms. I cooked dinner, set the table, and ate slowly. I thought about the journey, the party, the folder, the silence of that morning. Walking away hadn't been revenge. It hadn't been about punishing her. It had been about reclaiming my dignity, my voice, my life. I realized then that freedom doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it comes with silence. With an empty house. With a folder on a counter. And in that silence I found clarity. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't angry. I was free.